Services will now come to order. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Frank. Vice Chair Rose.
Here.
Representative Glick.
Here.
Representative Shaheen. Representative Ramos.
Here.
Representative Noble.
Here.
Representative Campos. Representative Hall. Representative Manuel.
Here.
Thank you. A quorum is present. At this time, the chair lays out House Bill 4220 as pending business. The chair offers a committee substitute. We will now continue with public testimony on House Bill 4220. At this time, the chair calls Patricia Ducaye. I don't know why I'm messing up names that I've been doing for the past 10 years. With the Office of the State Long-Term Ombudsman, Ms. Ducaye, you are representing the Office of State Long-Term Ombudsman, and you're speaking against House Bill 4220. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Ducaye.
Hi, I'm Patty Ducaye. I'm the State Long-Term Care Ombudsman employed by Texas Health and Human Services Commission. My office is independent within HHSC so that I can represent the interests of residents who live in nursing homes and assisted living facilities. My office opposes the committee substitute for HB 4220 because it conflicts with federal statute and regulations. It modifies the federal description of facility records that an ombudsman can access. I received the committee substitute yesterday, and my testimony is based on that version. All concerns outlined in my written testimony were shared with Representative Clardy's office. Authorized by the Federal Older Americans Act, our program was created in the 1970s in response to widespread abuse in facilities. Our central function is to protect the health, safety, welfare, and rights of residents. And I serve as a resident advocate. Staff and volunteer ombudsmen complete a 36-hour training before they start. That includes over 10 hours of training on facility regulations. All staff and volunteer ombudsmen must complete 18 hours of continuing education each year and report their activities and comply with our policies and procedures, like our consent requirements. Our policies require an ombudsman to report a complaint to long-term care regulatory or to the facility if we believe that there is a regulatory violation and if we have the consent of the individual who has complained. On a different note, if a provider has a complaint about an ombudsman, that's a grievance, and they should report the grievance to the manager of that ombudsman so that it can be investigated. Stakeholders who support this bill told me that ombudsmen are involved in health and safety complaints that they believe should be left to HHSC regulatory to investigate. They say ombudsmen should focus on quality of life complaints like food and not address concerns about things like infection control or other care issues like pressure ulcers. But we have a duty to protect the health, safety, welfare, and rights of residents, and we can have a positive effect on residents' lives when we work to solve those problems. Complaints and questions reach us by phone and email, and by our frequent visits to facilities. Our policies were carefully crafted to comply with federal regulations for the program. Our policies include instruction to an ombudsman when we identify a complaint. We must observe, conduct interviews, and may need to look at records to investigate. Section 3 of the bill would modify what facility records an ombudsman has access to, adding language about normal course of business and excluding our access to records if associated with a lawsuit. This is a problem because it limits our ability to investigate and resolve complaints. Whether a lawsuit has been filed, for example, has no bearing on whether we have a duty to respond to a complaint that we receive. Our role is distinct from others in the long-term care system, but it is vital to your constituents who live in long-term care facilities. I look forward to continued discussions with the author's office with the goal of ensuring compliance with federal law. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions for the witness? Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, the chair calls Alexa Skolman with Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program, speaking against the bill. Thank you again.
Hi, yes.
Excuse 1 second. Chair recognizes Representative Shaheen is present. Ms. Goldman, we show you registered as Alexis. Am I pronouncing your name right?
It's close. Alexis Schumann.
Schumann.
You got the
Oh,
against?
okay.
Correct, yes.
Schumann, and you're with the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program, and you're testifying against the bill. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right.
Yes, and I am the Deputy State Long-Term Care Ombudsman. I represent the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program, and we're independent within HHSC, so my testimony today does not represent HHSC. I won't speak for long, but I felt it was important to testify about what it means to be a long-term care ombudsman and how this bill would weaken our ability to advocate for residents. There are positive changes in the committee substitute, including updating some language to be consistent with our federal regulations, and we appreciate that. However, there's still elements that are inconsistent with our federal regulation and add limitations to our ability to advocate, namely Section 3, Paragraph A, and for this reason, we ask that you all not move the bill forward. You all know that ombudsmen protect the health, safety, welfare, and rights of residents. This mandate comes directly from the Older Americans Act. I've been an ombudsman for 8 years, and this is on the short end of the ombudsman tenure. There's ombudsmen that have been dedicated to helping residents for 20, 30 years and really dedicate their careers to doing this. Our staff and volunteer ombudsmen are highly dedicated and trained. We take the responsibility to be the residents' voice seriously. We've put an incredible amount of work into our policies and procedures to make sure they're consistent with our federal guidelines and regulations. Day after day, we hear from residents whose rights are being violated, from lack of choice and dignity to neglect and other health and safety concerns. And we feel passionate about our work because we see the differences we make in residents' lives. Even some days when the challenges feel insurmountable. It's difficult to see efforts via this bill that would chip away our ability to advocate for residents. And the language proposed in the bill is beyond what we are directed to do by the Older Americans Act and will restrict our ability to be that advocate. A great challenge about this work is that you'll never know what you're going to get. Every day brings a new complaint and a new resident and a new situation. So any language that adds conditions and limits to what we're authorized to do can restrict our ability to be flexible and to address problems that come up, even in ways that we may not recognize until we're faced with those new problems. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Schumann, you made the comment, you said you're volunteers. So what exactly do your volunteers do?
Oh, sure. So they're trained. The reference was made to CASA this morning, and so they're also very well trained the same way that a staff ombudsman is trained to do. So the 36 hours of training that Ms. Ducaye mentioned, as well as the 18 hours of continuing education. They also get regular supervision from staff ombudsmen and assistance with some of those more sticky complaints. But volunteers are really the heart of our program. We keep a close eye on them because we want them to feel supported so they can go in maybe weekly, to visit with residents and really get to know them and help with those concerns.
Okay. The chair recognizes Representative Campos present. Members, are there any questions for the witness? Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, the chair calls Jenny Hayes. It says Senior Executive Director. Ms. Hayes, thank you for being here. We show you as Jenny Hayes, and you're testifying on behalf of what organization?
Frontier Management. Frontier Management.
Frontier Management, okay.
As representing herself.
Yeah, so, okay, but you're
Representing
representing
myself,
yourself. Okay, okay. That's, okay. And you will be testifying for the bill?
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay, you begin your testimony.
Good afternoon. My name is Jenny Hayes. I'm a Senior Executive Director for Frontier Management, which is a member of TALA, the Texas Assisted Living Association, and I'm here to testify in support of this committee's sub for House Bill 4220.
But, okay. But are you representing Frontier, or are you just representing yourself?
I'm representing myself.
Okay. We just want to make sure.
I have been in the senior living industry for 15 years and have had the pleasure of working alongside long-term ombudsmen who were fantastic resources for our families and our residents. When a long-term care ombudsman is well-trained, focused on residents, and understands that there are services and resources that we need to be addressing in the community and with our residents, there can also be conflicts between what the ombudsman tell the families in accordance with our regulations. When we have an ombudsman come in, we feel that they are a value and a trusted partner for senior living providers. However, as anyone who has been in senior living could tell you, when an ombudsman abuses their broad authority or when they try to dive into things that are outside of their scope or their expertise, then long-term care ombudsmen can set up residents, families, and communities for conflict. One of the most common areas where I've seen this problem occur is when an ombudsman gets confused about the difference between nursing home regulations and estate assisted living regulations when they're into a community and they come in and looking for records and what our regulations provide. This bill requires ombudsmen to receive training on the Texas regulations for the types of long-term care communities that they will be visiting. When an ombudsman with a government-issued name badge gives residents and their families advice, families believe this information to be correct. Ombudsmen are believed to be trusted experts. When this information is wrong, because it's either nursing home regulations or it doesn't apply to assisted living communities because it's something required by another state or is simply misunderstood in the regulation itself. The misinformation puts the provider in an awkward and sometimes difficult position having to explain that difference to families or where that information came from. This bill improves training for ombudsmen, and it should help to reduce the conflicts between families and providers. Residents' records, we are required to give the ombudsman immediate access to residents and their information, yet ombudsmen have no requirement to sign the visitor log or leave behind documentation if a team member, a resident, or a resident's family has follow-up questions to what their visit was for. Because we are not allowed to question or delay the ombudsman investigation, we do not have the authority to create a form for the ombudsman to sign. This bill fixes that problem. It creates a small standardized paper trail so that we have some written accord or access to the resident for when they ask for access to the resident's file. This bill does not change the investigation process or the scope of the investigation, but it does give my residents and their families a name and a point of contact when following up on the issue. These changes are small, but they are important. Thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, just let me know.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions for the witness? Representative Noble?
So, if I've gotten this correctly, HHSC has an intake for investigations.
Correct.
And that's completely separate from the ombudsman.
Yes.
How would a facility know who has the authority to investigate and make suggestions and whatnot? How do y'all determine that?
Well, I think that's where the crossover and the confusion is when we do a report on something that is life safety or a health, abuse, neglect, or one of those allegations, we're going to report that to HHSC. But usually when we when we as a facility call an ombudsman, it's usually for a conflict of some sort. We've called them in for, when there's family dynamics that don't, we try to stay as, uninvolved with the family dynamics as possible, but maybe we call an ombudsman in and there's a conversation that they have or we have all three together. So there's a little bit more confusion. So it's really to kind of help facilitate. But if there is an issue that an ombudsman has with a care concern, that is something then they can report up to HHSC as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Members, thank you
Thank you.
for your testimony. At this time, the chair calls Ron Haney with Cascade Health Services. Thank you for being here today. We show you as Ron Haney, and you're testifying on behalf of Cascade Health Services and yourself. And you
Yes.
will be testifying for the bill.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. As you said, my name is Ron Haney. I'm the owner of Cascade Health Services. We're a small independent nursing home company in Texas, and I'm here testifying in support of HB 4220. While I have had concerns in the past with ombudsmen in our communities, usually due to regulatory interpretations or the ombudsman assuming the role of surveyor, I'm not here to bash ombudsman. We are fortunate that we have a very good relationship and a great resident advocate in our current ombudsman. When we have issues raised by families or residents, we usually try to engage the ombudsman and get them involved, particularly if the resident doesn't have family involved. I believe the relationship between a facility and the ombudsman should work together in the best interest of the resident with concerns while not having a negative impact on other residents. As ombudsmen are both paid and voluntary, this bill provides further clarification for training and defines the roles for all involved and makes this process as effective as it can be for the residents we serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ray Haney. Members, are there any questions for the witness? Thank you. At this time, the chair calls Kevin Warren with Texas Healthcare Association. Thank you for being with us today, Mr. Warren.
You're
We
welcome,
show
Madam
you
Chair. Thank you for being-
registered as Kevin Warren, and you're testifying for the bill on behalf of the Texas Healthcare Association.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
All right.
As Madam Chair said, for the record, my name is Kevin Warren, President and CEO of the Texas Healthcare Association, testifying in support of House Bill 4220. I want to start not only by saying my appreciation for Representative Clardy for filing this bill, but I also want to thank some of our witnesses that came before me, being folks like Mary Nichols and Patty Ducaye and Andrea with AARP, and their involvement in a stakeholder meeting that we had about a month ago in looking through and working through the issues that were identified in the as-filed bill. And I do believe that with their input, and although we didn't resolve all concerns and questions, which as you all know, doesn't always happen, but I think their input was appreciated, their input was heard, and I think you see that in the committee substitute language. I also want to take the time to acknowledge what the previous witness cited just a second ago with respect to the ombudsman themselves. And in the intent here, I heard earlier in testimony that, it's the intent here is not to diminish or bash the role and the responsibilities of the ombudsman. They play an invaluable role within these communities. They serve as the voice, as Mr. Haney said, they serve as the voice for the voiceless, if you will, for that person that doesn't have that advocate. They serve for someone who understands the regulations better than the resident does. They may not understand it to the degree that the facility does or that the HHSC surveyor does, given that it was previously acknowledged that they have about 10 hours of testimony, not 10 hours of testimony, but 10 hours of regulatory training, whereas if I put it into perspective, a person who becomes an administrator of a facility goes through almost a year's worth of training in order to do this, and then comparable to a surveyor. But the point being is they do serve in that voice. Specifically, I wanted just to address one of the I think the key roles, and it's the area where I hear the most common concerns that coming from our members with regard to the clarification between the regulatory role and the role of the ombudsman and their responsibilities. And if you may or may not recall from last session, House Bill 3961 was passed. This was a bill by Representative Spiller that required that all long-term care facilities post the communication, the contact information for ombudsman. The intent there was to ensure that we engage and increase the availability, the awareness of the program. We've heard for the last couple of sessions this lack of awareness, even though it is publicly posted and it's available for the residents. But at the same time, as we are ensuring that families, that residents, that the public knows that this ombudsman role exists within long-term care, we think it's equally important that there is clarification, hence part of the section of the bill that requires that clarification to be communicated with the family and the resident, that there is that clarification that they do not have a regulatory function or regulatory role. And I say that from the perspective that, as was previously stated, they are there to investigate complaints. So someone who doesn't understand it may hear that and think, oh, that's a surveyor. Okay, they're a surveyor. And so, when I hear that the most common concerns that I hear from members are when there are disagreements between the ombudsman and the facility that may be, that are potentially, regulatory related. And so what it does is it puts the facility in the middle. When the facility feels like, hey, I understand the regulation, it's not being exactly articulated or communicated clearly to the resident, but as the advocate, it puts them in the middle because no one, and I'll say this in closing, no one, whether it's the facility, the ombudsman, the resident, the family, no one wants the conflict because the conflict doesn't produce quality. And so we just got to try to figure out working together. The intent here of this bill is to provide increased transparency and, most importantly, to ensure that there's clarity between federal responsibilities and state. And with that, I see the stick and I'll close.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Members, are there any questions for the witness? Thank you, Kevin, for
Thank
your
you, ma'am.
testimony. Is there, at this time, there is no other witness signed up to testify. Is there anyone else here who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 4220? Seeing none, public testimony is closed, and the chair recognizes Representative Clardy to close on House Bill 4220.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and please spare the rod, don't spoil the child. I want to thank Mr. Warren for his comments and the witnesses here, and one thing he said is very important. This is not an adversarial hearing we are having. We very much appreciate the role of the ombudsman, the work they do, especially with their volunteers, to make this a good transition to serve the residents of Texas. Stand before you someone, and since the last interim, or during this last interim, I buried a father-in-law and buried a mother, both who came out of long-term care and went through palliative care with hospice. So these issues are near and dear to my heart, and all of us will have this experience, either personally or with household members. So what we want to have is the best elder care available in the union, and I think our ombudsman program helps with that a great deal. But as this is not an adversarial hearing, neither should be the role of the ombudsman. They are here to be supportive, to be unbiased, to facilitate the relationships of families and residents. They are not the state surveyors. They're not the investigators to do that regulatory role that the HHSC serves, and they're not prosecutors on the cases. I'm not maligning or speaking bad of anybody's intention of what they've done, but I think there's been certainly times where they've been overzealous and have overstepped their bounds. There was a discussion of there's some concern about the record that they're made available. There's a duty to provide information concerning the resident by the facility, by the operator, to the ombudsman. That is not a dispute. That should be there. What has happened on occasion is litigation files where there is a claim outstanding, a third-party claim. There are parts of those files which are protected by privilege, which should not be gone through, that the client will have at their location. Those are the things we're trying to protect. And again, consistent with the federal law, as Mr. Warren pointed out. This bill does not change substantive law. It does not reduce any obligation or duty of a long-term care facility. What it does do, it has a clarification of the respective roles of ombudsman versus surveyors and the duties of the facilities, and it addresses the record-keeping portion. You heard that there's times that people come in, they don't sign in, nobody knows who that person was that came in, the ombudsman. It's important when you're dealing with the personal medical records of a resident that we know who had access and they were appropriate to have that access. And I think it is important down the road. Again, I think this would help the ombudsman, the program, to make sure that they are consistent and transparent in what they do. So when they do have a resident complaint and they submit that paperwork and they finalize it, there's a paper trail and they can see what they've done in similar circumstances. And when they review their activities as an agency, as a department, they can see that they're being consistent in how they deal with residents and situations. So there are always going to be things that are different, unique circumstances that are going to maybe cause them, well, we did this here, but here in this situation we need to do it slightly different. But I think it's going to help them do a better job by having that accountability and that transparency and consistency. So with that, Madam Chairman, I would be happy to answer any questions, and I will close.
All right. The committee substitute is withdrawn, and if there is no objection, the bill will be left pending. The chair hears none, and HB 4220 will be left pending without objection. Thank you, Attorney Clardy. Who's next?
It's in order.
Okay. The chair lays out House Bill 4627 and recognizes Chair Click to explain her bill.
Thank you, Vice Chair Rose. Electronic Visit Verification, or EVV, is a computer-based system that electronically verifies the occurrence of personal attendant service visits by documenting the precise time of service delivery, when it begins and when it ends. Texas has required EVV since 2011 for certain Medicaid-funded home and community-based services, with additional services utilizing EVV in recent years per federal and state requirements. Currently, HHSC provides reimbursement for usage of the state's contracted EVV providers and recognizes the usage of a healthcare provider's other EVV, but does not reimburse for it. HB 4627 would allow HHSC to contemplate reimbursement for EVV of the non-state vendor. I'm also working on a committee substitute to address the fiscal note and make sure that the reimbursement is optional, not required. There are a few resource witnesses here to answer your technical questions, and I'm open for any questions and would like to reserve my right to close.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions for Chair Click? We will now begin public testimony. The chair calls Jessica Boston with the Texas Association for Home Care and Hospice. Thank you for being here with us today. We show you registered as Jessica Boston on behalf of the Texas Association of Home Care and Hospice. And you will be testifying for the bill. Is that correct?
That's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chair Click, for carrying this bill for us. This is an important technical correction that we're very pleased to see before the committee today. As Chair Rose mentioned, I'm Jessica Boston with the Texas Association for Home Care and Hospice. We represent over 1,200 licensed home and community support services agencies across the state of Texas, providing medically necessary nursing, attendant, and therapy services to over 500,000 vulnerable aged and individuals with disabilities. TAC also represents a workforce of frontline healthcare workers of over 300,000 nurses, therapists, and personal aides combined. Electronic visit verification is a computer system that electronically documents and verifies the service delivery and documents the information such as the date, time, specific type, location, etc., of those types of Medicaid visits. Unfortunately, the state's process for the use of proprietary EVV systems is creating an unnecessary challenge for HHSC and home care providers. House Bill 4627 provides a technical correction that will allow providers to achieve a true open model system for EVV, increasing efficiency for the state and flexibility for providers. Language in the current EVV rule states extraneous administrative processes for HHSC to work with systems that aren't directly contracted with the state. A simple language revision will allow HHSC the option to approve all EVV vendors who meet the qualifications and maintain oversight, increasing standardization and reliability. Without the freedom to utilize alternative EVV vendors, providers must go through staff retraining for new state EVV systems and make changes within their electronic medical record platforms that is time-consuming and very expensive, resulting in thousands of dollars in non-reimbursed costs to providers. Not all providers are the same size and most certainly do not have the same internal software systems for billing, service, documentation, scheduling, etc. An open model will allow businesses whose expertise is in service delivery to make decisions about EVV that will be the best fit for their organization and allow greater focus on client care. Thank you for your time, and please support House Bill 4627 to correct language that currently adds an additional administrative burden and restricts HHSC's ability to implement a true open model system. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions for the witness? Thank you.
Ma'am.
At this time, the chair calls Marjorie Costello with Disability Services of the Southwest. Thank you for being here. We show you registered as Marjorie Costello, and you're here on behalf of the Disability Services of the Southwest, and you will be testifying for the bill.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Marjorie Costello. I'm Chief Administrative Officer of Disability Services of the Southwest, Lifespan Home Health, and CDS in Texas. We have 22 home care agencies across Texas and the largest FMSA in Texas, and we serve about 12,000 individuals with disabilities and about 18,000 caregivers. In the past 12 years, my organization has gone through 3 EVV transitions, where HHS has moved all home care providers from one EVV vendor to another. We are now in the coming months facing a 4th transition. HB 4627 is a language change that allows for an important conversation to be had. Is it feasible for HHS to reimburse alternative vendors for EVV so that agencies can have a true choice where they use or who they use for their EVV? Right now, agencies have no choice. Either they stay with the state-funded EVV system and face the incredible financial burden of transitioning to a new system, something I have done 3 times in the last decade, and these transitions all look the same. I have about 20 people across our EVV departments. In the first 3 months of transition, the stress and overtime means I will lose 50 to 60% of them. I will likely lose 90% by the end of the year. The payroll issues caused by transitioning means we will lose personal care attendants who live paycheck to paycheck and can't afford to stay in a job that messes with their pay. We will face billing issues, we will face compliance issues, and we will face cash flow issues. This cripples agencies and takes years to financially recover from. An EVV system integrates with our electronic medical record systems, our billing systems, our payroll systems. It takes incredible manpower and time to build efficiencies so that all these systems work together and work well. And then HHS chooses a new vendor, which I understand. There are better vendors out there. So what's an agency's other option? They can go with a third party, an EVV vendor, and pay out of pocket. These third-party systems are very expensive and financially out of the range of most agencies. Truly only large agencies can take that on and survive it. So, do you choose the state system and tear your EVV department apart, throw away years of integrations, and risk losing employees that were so hard to find to begin with? Or do you pay out of pocket so that you can at least control when and how these changes happen and protect your staff, but greatly damage your agency's financial health? We're basically darned if we do and darned if we don't. HB 4627 allows HHS to start this necessary discussion of having an open model system in Texas, allowing agencies to have a true choice without financial punishment. It is another layer of security for the home care industry. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions for the witness? You want in there? Yeah, we'll call up a resource witness. Jordan Nichols, Deputy Associate Commissioner with Health and Human Services Commission.
Hello, my name is Jordan Nichols. I'm the Deputy Associate Commissioner for Medicaid CHIP Operations with the Health and Human Services Commission. I'm here as a resource witness on the bill.
Representative Noble.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Okay, so we've sat here this session and found that there's things that we can't, that our agencies can't do because they haven't upgraded software, and including this morning that they can't add a second parent to be able to make medical decisions because we haven't upgraded our software. And yet it sounds like, if I understood correctly, we change vendors and require the people that deal with us to reinvent the wheel when we change vendors on this particular software. Is that an accurate assessment of what we've just heard?
So for this particular contract, when the system's reprocured, if the providers are using the state system and we move to a new state system, then they do have to transition to that new IT system.
So it sounds like it's kind of a burdensome process that we have put into place here. Is this going to take a legislative remedy, or is this something y'all can fix for the people that have to deal with the state red tape? Because that's what we're talking about here.
So as long as the state continues to provide a contracted software solution for providers, those contracts would typically, like other state contracts, have a term. And whenever those contracts are up for renewal, we go back through the procurement process to identify the best system or the best provider of those systems. So that would be the standard process for continuing to offer a state-funded system. For providers that choose to use their own EVV system, as is allowed by the legislation or by the current statute, then they would have the opportunity to continue using their own system even if the state transitions to state vendor.
Is there any weighted consideration of the time and effort that is taken to transfer to a new system when those procurements happen?
So I don't know that there would be a standard, like every time there's a procurement of this nature that would always be considered, but those weighted criteria are developed whenever the procurement is developed. I don't know off the top of my head whether provider administrative burden was considered as a weighted criteria for the most recent procurement.
And were you involved in the development of this fiscal note?
Yes.
And why is it so high?
There's a couple of factors. So the costs that we pay to the state vendor qualify for an enhanced federal match rate. We receive 75% federal match from the feds and 25% from the state general revenue. If we pay administrative costs directly to providers, we're not eligible for that enhanced match rate and instead only get 50% match rate from the feds. So there's a difference in the FMAP, the federal medical assistance percentage for that. So that's one element. The other...
Hang on a minute. So you're saying that we will lower our federal match if we provide a system that is consistent, or is that
if we
is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so the state qualifies for enhanced federal match if we pay for a state-operated EVV system or a system operated by a contractor on behalf of the state. So we qualify for that enhanced match on the state contract. If we directly reimburse providers or pay them money to buy their own EVV system, we don't qualify for that enhanced match. It's a federal regulation. So we would only qualify for the 50% match rate.
Wow. That's crazy.
Members, are there any other questions for the witness? Thank you. At this time, the chair calls David Flores with Lando Inc. and himself. Thank you for being here today. We show you registered as David Flores, and on behalf of Lando Inc. and yourself, and you are for the bill, or for House Bill 4627. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yes. Good day, Madam Chair, and members of the Human Services Committee. My name is David Flores again. I'm the IT administrator at Lando Inc. We're out of Alice, Texas. We provide home care services to about 600 clients in the Coastal Bend. I'm here in support of House Bill 4627 because it'll give us back a little control of our business systems and give us full data ownership to many of the 1,200 agencies throughout Texas that provide services to your constituents. For us, since 2015, home care agencies have been kind of at the mercy of HHSC here. We, like the previous witness, have gone through 3 different vendors out of pocket, and it's unreimbursed. And it is a very expensive endeavor, very time-consuming endeavor, and an endeavor that is hard to come back from a business and workflow process. And so, in addition to those obstacles, there was an instance where one of the EVV vendors, had a security breach. And in that security breach, we were out for a week, had our whole administrative staff basically twiddling our thumbs because we couldn't perform mission-critical operations. And so the support for this bill in particular comes down to giving us back control over our business and our ability to have a path forward, hopefully that would get funded for proprietary systems, where we have a little bit more control over what happens with those systems. Texas is a pro-business state. This is a pro-business bill, and I would hope that you guys would take that into consideration as we move forward. I want to thank you for your time, and I can't stress how important this is to home care agencies throughout the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions for the witness? Thank you, Mr. Flores. At this time, the chair calls Ralph Perez with Bauer Inc. and himself. Thank you for being here today. We show you registered as Ralph Perez on behalf of Bauer Inc. and yourself, and you're here testifying for the bill. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the Human Services Committee, my name is Ralph Bettis. I'm Vice President of Business Development for Valware Inc. Valware is an approved EVV PSO here in the state of Texas. If you were to look at the PSO section of TMHP's website, you'd find approximately 75% of the EVV PSOs here in Texas have chosen Valware as their EVV solution. I'm proud to say that Valware is leading the way in innovation when it comes to EVV, and I think our success among PSOs is reflective of our efforts in that area. A decade ago, Texas made the decision to use dual EVV vendors, a closed system essentially, and this approach to EVV dispensed with competition in the EVV sector. It forced agencies to use one of two of the Texas EVV vendors. House Bill 4627 proposes to give greater freedoms to Texas home care agencies with regards to their choices in EVV solutions. More importantly, HB 4627 paves the way towards an open model system in Texas. This is significant legislation with wide-reaching impacts on Texas businesses, their employees, and the customers that they serve. Attendants are currently clocking in and clocking out using EVV methods that have hardly changed in a decade. In an atmosphere today when we see constant innovation in every area of industry, it seems remarkably odd that we've seen no innovation in the area of EVV, but there's a reason for this. A marketplace where consumers don't have choices is a marketplace that ignores the needs of consumers. John Cornyn recognized this. He said, when businesses compete, consumers win. Competition keeps prices low, quality high, and ensures the best products and services come out on top. Former chairman of the Federal Reserve, Alan Greenspan, said the free market system depends on competition for its vitality and growth. If there's no competition, there's no need for efficiency, innovation, or responsiveness. Economists, politicians, business people, everyone agrees that when you remove competition from the equation, the consumer pays the price. And that's the perfect description of what's happened for home care agencies in this area of EVV. HB 4627 is the first steps in reversing the negative impacts of a closed vendor system in Texas, allowing agencies more control over their EVV solutions. For the first time in a decade, will force EVV vendors to compete. This leads to better EVV solutions, improvements in the way those services are delivered, and ultimately, competition will drive the cost of EVV down, a benefit to the state of Texas and Texas taxpayers. The decision to operate as a closed EVV vendor state, while unintentional, it hurt Texans and Texas businesses. And HB 4627 is an opportunity to correct a mistake. So I'd ask that you not miss that opportunity. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions of the witness? Thank you, Mr. Perez. At this time, the chair calls Rachel Hammond with the Texas Association with TAC. Ms. Hammond, I'm sorry. Thank you for being here today. We show you registered as Rachel Hammond on behalf of TAC and yourself. Well, on behalf of TAC.
Yes.
And you're testifying for the bill.
Yes, ma'am.
For House Bill 4627.
Apologize for the acronym. I registered just now to be able to hopefully answer some of the questions. Again, my name is Rachel Hammond, the Executive Director for the Texas Association for Home Care and Hospice, and thank you for the opportunity to support this bill. You've heard a lot of testimony today in support of the bill, but there were some questions about the fiscal note. In the substitute, we did address some of that in the substitute by taking out some language that I think promoted the fiscal note on the bill. So what this bill does really is open up the opportunity for us to have a conversation with HHSC and explore that opportunity for providers to possibly be reimbursed for the use of their own or a third-party system. Right now, I think you heard them say that CMS won't pay providers directly for that. They can't draw down that federal match. However, with the revisions in the bill, it allows us the opportunity to look at the possibility of contracting and creating a pool of alternate vendors that agencies can then work with that have already been approved by HHSC. So therefore, it would allow the state to possibly contract with those alternate vendors and then pull down the greater match. So it gives us that opportunity to explore that. Right now, the door is closed on that. We can't even explore that opportunity right now. So this is again giving us the opportunity to look at using alternate vendors, giving providers the choice to use alternate vendors instead of being at the mercy of the state and their procurement process every 2 to 3 years. And I think you've heard today how disruptive that is and how costly that is. And as we know, we've also been in front of this committee for many, many years about the attendant rates, and that our rates have not been adjusted in 16 years. And so it's absolutely unconscionable to consider putting more unfunded mandates on a provider industry that is already struggling.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Members, are there any questions for the witness? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
At this time, there are no other witnesses signed up to testify. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 4627? Seeing none, the public testimony is closed, and the chair recognizes Representative Click to close on House Bill 4627.
Thank you, members. You know, we've heard a lot from the home care agencies. I also get phone calls from patients in my district whenever the devices are not working, and then they can't get their attendance paid. And it really is a frightening situation for them, because if they can't get their workers paid, they're going to quit. And many of these are fragile individuals in their homes. We need to fix this. I mean, this is, I think, the second or third time that we've reprocured since I've been in the legislature, and it's been a nightmare every time. And we need to fix this for patients and for the businesses that serve them in our community. So thank you, and I close.
If there's no objection, House Bill 4627 will be left pending. Is there any objection? The chair hears none. House Bill 4627 is left pending without objection. Okay, so my bill is up. My staff telling me my bill. Oh, wait a minute.
The chair lays out House Bill 4627 and recognizes Representative Click. Oops, I'm sorry. The chair lays out HB 4629 and recognizes Representative Click to explain the bill. Members, this bill is HB 4629 allows current members appointed to the Intellectual and Developmental Disability System Redesign Advisory Committee, or the IDD-SRAC, at HHSC to be eligible to be reappointed to serve an additional term. I think it's really important because this, we need the institutional memory of folks, because this is a huge project over a number of years, and this will make it more seamless, and I think will result in a better product at the end of the development. I'm open for any questions and reserve the right to close. Any questions, members? Okay. I can't. The chair calls Lauren Gherkin. Lauren Gherkin. Chair calls Leah Rummel.
Thank you, Chair, Acting Chair. It's Representative Click, and thank you so much for this bill that you have brought forward today, and also for really supporting the IDD community and the pilot that goes along with this very important bill, which we were able to get funding for.
Could you state your name, who you represent?
Yes, I'm Leah Rummel, and I am representing myself today and my son, Brennan Rummel, who has intellectual disabilities, is on the CLASS program. And I serve on the advisory committee. I've been on the advisory committee for many years. My term is about to expire, along with a lot of the institutional people who have been on the advisory committee for many years. And this has been a very complex committee. It is a very time-intensive committee. I'm on calls or working on this several days a week, every week, and have been for the last 4 years because this is a very complex program. And what the SRAC is doing is trying to develop a pilot program that will be sort of the basis for persons with intellectual disabilities that will test a new model. We'll see how that model works after a 2-year period beginning 2/1/24. And then the IDD waivers will then move into this pilot, which is sort of the structure for the future of persons with intellectual disabilities. So there's been a lot of work done. We've developed a new person-centered plan, a new assessment. We've developed integrated service coordination, which is going to be really cool. We have now people with disabilities, with the goal of living in the community, so we're going to have a housing navigator. So there's lots of things we're going to test in this model. We want to make sure that it's right. And so we don't want to lose that institutional knowledge as a result of some of the rules about term limits. So we're hoping we can make it through the implementation, and that's why this bill is important. And I hope any questions that you guys have?
Questions, members? Thank
All
you
right.
for being here.
No problem. Appreciate it.
Okay, is there anyone else wishing to testify on, for, or against House Bill 4629? Thank you, members. From an institutional knowledge perspective, it's important that we allow these members to continue to serve the state to complete this project. Thank you, and I close. And if there's no objection, House Bill 4629 will be left pending. Is there objection? The chair hears none. HB 4629 is left pending without objection. Okay, the chair lays out House Bill 4075 by Representative Romo and recognizes Representative Romero to lay out his bill.
Thank you, Acting Chair Click, and committee members. Honored to lay out before you House Bill 4075. This is another bill regarding mental health. We all know that we must find ways to increase Texas's workforce of skilled mental health professionals. 4075 will do that. This bill proposes to amend the Occupations Code to allow the Texas Behavioral Health Executive Council to update and streamline its marriage and family therapist licensing process for out-of-state applicants while maintaining competency and quality requirements as well as appropriate licensing fees and jurisprudence examination. Additionally, this bill would allow the Executive Council to enter and implement reciprocity agreements with other jurisdictions as long as the other jurisdictions' requirements for licensing are substantially equal to this state's requirements, thereby allowing for continuity of care, contributing to assist marriage and family therapists to join the workforce more expeditiously to serve Texans at their earliest convenience. This bill is supported by the Texas Association of Marriage and Family Therapy. We do have Daryl Spinks, the Executive Director of BHEC, here with us today as a resource witness if you'd like to answer any more, if you have any more nuanced questions. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions for you.
Questions, members? All righty.
Reserve my right to close.
All righty, we'll begin our, Representative Noble.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just had a question on the second page of your bill where you have that the work experience includes the number of hours, but then it doesn't specify any number of hours.
So there's. still
That was a
gonna
little
be
confusing to me.
Well, there will be, let me get to that specific,
I'm on line 12.
okay, and that is,
Page 2, line 12.
so the short answer is the Daryl will be able to tell you, how they're going to do it by within the agency. What we're wanting to do here, Representative Noble, is to make sure that the amount of supervision hours, the amount of all the different states around us, so many of them are different in their supervision hours, the educational hours, and we're making sure that as many of them line up as possible. So the marriage and family, so we had a previous bill that we brought in that allows for reciprocity, but this deals specifically with the marriage and family therapist. And we're going to make sure that we line up with neighboring states and other states that we hope to have agreements with them. So if someone moves out, moves to, they have a different home, they can still continue to practice. But your question was in regard to the amount of actual hours here. I may let Daryl answer that question because I'm having a little.
Yeah, because in that paragraph and in the one below, it says the number of hours as,
I know,
the
it
second
just-
one says the executive council will decide that, but it doesn't say it on that particular instance on number 2, which is, I was just curious about why.
You're right. Mm-hmm.
It doesn't seem to be anything specified on that.
The chair recognizes Representative Hall has joined us.
Well, let's see if Daryl can answer that question.
Great.
If not, I'll
Thank you.
get back to you on that, okay? And I'll keep reading this. Any other questions?
Any other questions, members? Alrighty, we'll begin our public testimony and reserve your right to close.
If she wants the resource witness, we can call Daryl Speaks.
I'm sorry.
Does representative want a resource witness?
Do you want a resource witness, Representative Noble, to come up first, or? Okay. Chair calls Daryl Spinks.
That's the resource witness.
Sorry, I didn't see that. You'll state your name, who you represent in your position on the issue.
Sure. Daryl Spinks, I'm the Executive Director for the Texas BHEC. Neutral on the issue, here to serve as a resource witness. In direct response to your question, Representative Noble, there's really 2 reasons. One, by putting the set number of hours in there, it's kind of boomerang back and bit us. Because remember, this is an evidence-based profession, standards change, we learn different things as time goes, so we need that malleability and fluidity that allows us to adjust as the science changes. But also, as Representative Romero alluded to, it really hampers, you can really get some unfair results when individuals who have been practicing out of state for 20 years were licensed under maybe lesser standards, and yet they come in and now they have to go back under supervision when there's really no reason for it. They're a known quantity. And so this gives the board the flexibility to set those hours. And we can now, with this, we can also set caveats or exemptions or allow for waivers. You could set a standard and then say, oh, well, you've been practicing for 25 years, no complaints, we'll waive that, whatever that delta is there. So that's why we're doing this.
Other questions, members? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
The chair calls Tristan Castaneda. I show your name as Tristan Castaneda and that you are representing the Texas Association for Marriage and Family Therapy, and you're for the bill. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, please begin.
Madam Chair, my name is, for the record, Tristan Castaneda. I am here representing the Texas Association of Marriage and Family Therapy. Thank you very much for affording us the opportunity to provide some few remarks. I want to thank Representative Romero for filing this bill. I think it's no secret that as Texas grows, there's a surging need where the available number of licensees far outpaces the demand for services. When all of the mental health licensure boards were folded underneath the BHEC, there was obviously a whole bunch of efficiencies, administrative savings that were associated with that. At the same time, we've also figured out that because there was a lot of prescriptive matters laid out in statute, we're going to transfer a lot of those responsibilities to the appropriate licensure boards. And by doing that, we are improving the pipeline of folks that are there in order to deliver services. And so with that, I think everyone else covered anything, but I'm happy to respond to any questions that someone might have.
Questions, members?
Fantastic.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
That's the last one. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on, for, or against House Bill 4075? Seeing none, the public testimony is closed, and the chair recognizes Representative Romero to close.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for asking that question, Representative Noble. And I think that, Daryl answered it really well. I mean, this is why we have BHEC. I mean, their job, their role is to study how we can help get more therapists to be able to see their clients. And that's what this bill really does. That's what the previous bills that I brought forward in regards to reciprocity and how we can get, more therapists in front of our kids, in front of our families, in front of our married couples. And this bill goes a long way. So, well, with that, I close unless you have any other questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If there's no objection, House Bill 4075 will be left pending. Is there objection? The chair hears none. HB 4075 is left pending without objection. The chair lays out House Bill 4233 and recognizes Representative Sweener to explain her bill.
Thank you, Chair, members, for the opportunity to lay out House Bill 4233. This bill seeks to provide foster parents of children at risk of running away with the proper training to best support those kids. Approximately 2,000 kids in Texas foster care go missing every year, most of which are runaways. In 2021, that number was 1,767 children, about 7% of kids in care at the time. And of those, 15% of those kids were not located after a year. And 5% of those kids, 87 children, were never located, and DFPS asked a judge to end its responsibilities over them. 42 of those missing children were still minors when the state petitioned judges to end their care. According to the state, at least 2 foster children also died while missing in 2021. While Texas currently requires extensive training for become a foster parent, runaways is something that is missed over. And we have a foster parent here today who will talk about her experience and the training she was required to have that did not apply, and the training that was missing and made her experience much more difficult. In Texas, the typical missing foster care child is 15 to 17 years old and has run away an average of 3 times. This means there are opportunities to address and prevent future runaway incidents with each child. Foster runaways are at an acute risk of being sexually trafficked. 60% of sex trafficking victims recovered through FBI raids across the U.S. were from foster care or group homes, and again, generally ended up there due to running away. Training is particularly important, and because of not enough support, about half of foster care families discontinue fostering within the first year. Evidence-based runaway prevention training exists on a national level and is being utilized in at least 8 states and could be easily incorporated into existing training. So members, I hope for your favorable consideration on this bill. Open to ask any questions, and if not, we do have a witness here.
Question, members? All righty, we'll reserve your right to close and begin our public testimony. Chair calls Lucy Johnson. I show your name is Lucy Johnson and you're representing yourself, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you're for the bill?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. I am a foster mom. In March of last year, I received my full-time foster license for 12 to 17-year-olds. And within less than a month, I was placed with a 14-year-old who immediately tried to run away. The very night that she was placed with me, she was texting men from Austin and San Antonio my personal address to try and get them to pick them up. I was given no advice by her caseworker or my foster agency caseworker on what to do about this except to limit her phone time. Less than a week after this incident, after buying drugs at school, I was finally advised that I could take her cell phone. And this incident immediately meant she tried to run out of the house and run away. While trying to stop her from running out of the house, I was punched several times. and the violence did not stop until I just decided to let her run. It took local law enforcement 30 minutes to respond to the original 911 call while I tracked her across my neighborhood and into an adjoining private ranch. It was only after this that a safety plan was made where I first discovered any resources for preventing runaways. But in this case, I was simply told the next time she tries to run away, don't try to stop her and don't try to follow her unless you think it's safe. 3 weeks after this, she ran away for good. She was missing for over a month. Never was I told anything about existing resources like the Texas Youth Hotline or existing national evidence-based runaway prevention programs that exist online for free. Representative Zwiener has already told you some of the horrible statistics that exist within the state of Texas, that over 1,700 children in our foster care system run away. Yet I and other foster parents, particularly those of teenagers, are not given any evidence-based training on preventing runaways. I am highly aware of how much training is already expected of foster parents in this state. I receive training and spend hours on training that does not apply to me. Even though I'm only licensed for 12 to 17-year-olds, I took infant CPR, infant and toddler safety, early child learning. I got training on pool safety and fireplace safety, even though my house nor any of my friends' houses have pools or fireplaces. And I am fine with receiving any of this training. But it is ridiculous in this day and age that I have to take 3 hours of training on recognizing sexual abuse and trafficking. But during that 3 hours, nothing is ever mentioned on preventing sex trafficking or preventing runaways. This bill is far from the end-all be-all for preventing teen runaways. But rather, I think it is a first step in equipping foster parents with the basic tools we need to have a fighting chance. Thank you again for this opportunity to speak, and I'll answer any questions you might have.
Representative Ramos.
Thank you. My first question is the child. What happened? What happened ultimately with the child?
So ultimately, the child reached out to her biological mother and came to her biological mother's house. My understanding, after talking several months later with her original caseworker, that every time she was found at the house, she attempted to run away when CPS tried to pick her up. This happened multiple times, and eventually a sort of détente was reached between the 14-year-old and her caseworker, in which the caseworker agreed casually not to pick up the teen as long as she enrolled in school in the fall. This was the last time I was in touch with the caseworker, and I do not know the current whereabouts or situation regarding that teen.
Okay. My second question, well, more of a comment, I think. Part of this training, DFPS probably needs the training themselves to address these issues. But you said that there were some national resources that you were not made aware of.
Correct.
And could you speak a little bit to some of the, what do you think that you would have received or been able to do differently having had those resources to prevent this child or to dissuade this child from running away, that you received the information that you received, those other resources that would have been able to hinder or dissuade this child from making that decision?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I don't know if anything that I would have done would have ultimately stopped this teenager from running away. However, the national program that I talked about is called Let's Talk, which I believe I gave information to my representative, but I can also give to the committee. And it lays out a series of talks that parents can have with their foster teenagers about what steps in particular that the household could make to make that household viable for the teen. Not necessarily that the teen is happy there, but what steps the parents can take to prevent the teen from running away, whether it's just for that week or that month or for the next year. This teen had a history of running away that was not reported to me when I first agreed to take her. If I had known that the teen was at risk of running away, I would have immediately started therapy sessions that weren't based on what her therapy was based at the time, which was just drug use, but more focused on the risks of running away, letting her know the consequences of running away. I did not know until researching possible bills that it's illegal for teens to run away in Texas. I think even just laying out the legal consequences of running away will stop a lot of teens. But I did not know anything about the statistics or the chances of a teen running away in any of my hours of training. I'd heard that it happened, but other than that, I didn't hear anything.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Other questions, members? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
At this time, there are no other witnesses signed up to testify. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 4233? Seeing none, testimony is closed, and the chair recognizes Representative Zwiener to close on HB 4233.
Members, thank you for taking the time to hear House Bill 4233. I know Chair Frank is not here right now, but he had mentioned to me that if we add a training, we should be taking a training away. What I will say is I don't think that's actually what we need to do. I think we need to ask DFPS to be more directed in training people for the type of kids they're certifying them for. Because having somebody get certified for infant CPR when they are taking teenagers and not having them trained on runaways does not make a lot of sense. And so I look forward to working with this committee to try and find a solution to make sure parents are getting the tools they need. Because again, we have a very large number of teens running out of foster care every year, and parents are not getting the support they need. So if there are no questions, I close.
Representative Ramos.
Representative Zwiener, so going to your comment right now and what's something that the foster parent also testified to. So is there, the way it is written now, do you believe that this would be added in addition to the way the bill is written right now? Because my concern is we have a lot of very supportive, but it's also exhausting. I mean, it's just so much these foster parents have to get certified for and retrain and retrain and retrain. I like your idea. I mean, apply it to whatever children that they're going to be taking in. But this doesn't really speak to that. I mean, how would we make that happen?
First of all, I'm not sure that DFPS needs authority from us to be more directed in what training they give which families. I think they have some of that discretion now in statute. I'd be open from hearing them if they think differently, but we just require that they provide training. This bill is written for that to be a subsection that is part of the training. And right now we do have this written fairly widely, but we're open to narrowing it to just apply to certain age groups.
I like that. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Other questions, members? All righty. Thank you.
Thank you.
If there's no objection, House Bill 4233 will be left pending. Is there objection? The chair hears none. HB 4233 will be left pending without objection. The chair lays out HB 1667 and recognizes Representative Jatan to explain his bill.
Thank you, Chair. Members, I'm here to lay out House Bill 1667, which makes changes to laws governing the reporting of suspicions of child abuse or neglect and seeks to provide alternatives to reporting in certain low-risk cases or circumstances of poverty, so families can receive the services they need without CPS investigation. Families in need of assistance should be able to receive services without being fully investigated as if they were willfully abusing their children. These circumstances are different, and House Bill 1667 creates a pathway for trained professionals to treat the different circumstances appropriately. House Bill 1667 makes three main changes to Texas reporting laws. First, it eliminates what is known as universal mandatory reporting and replaces it with a system where certain professionals who have frequent contact with children are designated as mandatory reporters. Second, it requires reporters to confidentially provide the Department of Family Protective Services with their name and contact information rather than allowing them to remain anonymous. Finally, it creates a process for certain concerns that do not adversely affect the child's physical or mental health or well-being to be referred to a local community-based prevention or family prevention services providers rather than be reported to CPS. I do have a committee substitute that was drafted with the consultation of stakeholders in DFPS. The committee substitute arrived too late to be heard today. But in that committee substitute, there will be the following changes. We're adding language that states that concerns related to child's behavior, truancy, or conditions of poverty that do not adversely affect the child's safety or well-being are not required to be reported to DFPS. Requires professionals who are legally mandated to report suspicions of abuse or neglect to receive training that includes information on matters to be reported to DFPS, and the proper procedures for making reports, alternatives to filing a CPS report, and what concerns may be referred to community-based service providers instead of CPS. This section also directs the department to develop training for professionals that includes this information. It eliminates language requiring a community-based service provider to provide case management services. This change was made based on feedback from providers to make it more broadly applicable and avoid unintentional limiting of services to families that may be referred. And finally, it includes language requiring the department to make reasonable efforts to obtain the name and contact information of a reporter and directs the department to conduct a limited investigation and to report under procedures currently outlined in the code if they are unable to obtain the reporter's information. And so thank you for the opportunity to lay out House Bill 1667. Happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I reserve the right to close.
Questions, members? Representative Manuel.
Mine isn't really a question. I just wanted to say thank you so much for being very sensitive. I know that there is a will to go from anonymous to confidential, but thank you so much for putting safeguards in there that will give people a chance to get used to it, and then also having the community aspect of it. I really very much appreciate. I don't know if you had been told I was the one who would not stop talking about the community-based and cultural-based, and I will not stop, but I very much appreciate the changes that you've made. And it's just very thoughtful, and I very much appreciate it. Thank you very much.
I appreciate that, and I think it was a good idea to be able to have this limited investigation for those that, if you receive a report that you're not able to gather all the information from the person that's reporting it, to be able to at least do a preliminary investigation makes sense. And so I think we'll have a committee sub that addresses and makes this bill even better, and we'll have that for the next hearing. But happy to answer any other questions. Otherwise, I reserve the right to close.
Representative Ramos.
Thank you, Representative Jatan. There is a specific exclusion of persons or individuals, and it strikes that language and specifically addresses the professional making the complaint. Why that change? Removing. I mean, I understand what a professional is based on the description that's provided in here, but it's specifically excluding a person who has reasonable cause to believe and hyperemphasizes professionals that are in the licensed, certified, or whatever. Could you speak a little to that?
Sure. I don't know that I could speak to exactly all that was behind the specific changes, but I can say that our goal overall is to make sure that professionals that are in constant contact with them, that would have the expertise to really weigh into whether or not there's abuse or neglect that warrants a full CPS investigation, to be able to have them weigh into it, make that determination, and then if there's better services out there, for those services to be offered instead. I'm not sure if that gets to your question or not. Or is there a specific part of the bill that you're looking at that?
Well, I mean, like just even on the first page where it strikes the word persons and says professionals, and then it lists a professional. But I guess I'm having difficulty wrapping my head of why we wouldn't want a person who has reasonable cause to believe that a child's physical or mental shall immediately, we've removed that verbiage and said a professional, someone who is working in a licensed, certified, what have you. I don't understand
Yeah,
why.
in that section would be, for the mandatory reporting, and so those professionals would be the ones that have that responsibility for the mandatory reporting. This doesn't exclude others from being able to still put in reports of potential abuse and neglect. And so, and that's I think that's the main reason for that portion being changed.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, members? Alrighty, we'll reserve your right to close and we'll begin public testimony. Chair calls Kate Murphy. I show you registered as Kate Murphy and you represent Texans Care for Children and you're for the bill. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Please begin.
Good morning. I'm Kate Murphy. I'm the Director of Child Protection Policy at Texans Care for Children. We support HB 1667, and we really appreciate that the goal of this bill is to allow for more supportive options for families that may feel a little bit less adversarial than what we see in low-risk situations where there's some concern about what's going on with the family or there's some challenge. We think there's a really, really strong benefit to being able to connect families to community services in this way. We do have two suggestions to continue to strengthen the bill. We really appreciate the changes that are proposed in the committee sub that I know isn't in front of you right now, but those are all very strong changes that we really appreciate. And in addition to that, we think two other things that could strengthen this bill and really help with implementation are partnering with a helpline. A number of other states are already doing this, and they have helplines that they use so that reporters, the professionals that would be required to report, do not have to understand all of the resources available in their community. They can rely on a helpline to make those connections. We have two helplines available in Texas that we could use to do that. One is 211. The other is the parent helpline. And we think that would just take some of the burden off of providers and make it a little bit easier for them to make these community referrals. The second is that we think there might be some benefit to starting this as a pilot and really making sure that our mandatory reporters, the teachers, the doctors, police, really understand this option and are well supported in making the determination of when they can use this option or when they need to call CPS, and that they know where to go to make those referrals, because we know each community looks a little bit different. But this is a pretty significant shift. It's a good shift, but we want to make sure that it's an option that people choose and they don't just default to calling CPS because that's what they're used to. So those are our recommendations, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions, members? Thank you. Chair calls Judy Powell. I show you registered as Judy Powell, and you are with the Parent Guidance Center, and you're for the bill. Is that correct?
Yes, I am for the bill.
Thank you. Please begin.
Hi, my name is Judy Powell. I am Communications Director for Parent Guidance Center, and we help parents involved with the child welfare system. And I definitely support the committee sub of HB 1667. I was happy to work with the office, making it a really great bill. I've been advocating for parents involved with CPS for 19 years, and I've been doing legislative advocacy for 16 of those 19 years. So I kind of predate, I think, all of you. So you wouldn't have heard some of my early testimonies back in like 2009-ish. Yes.
Before us, we don't have the substitute.
Yes.
We have the bill as filed, so
So
you
I
need to
support
address
1467.
your remarks to that, please. Thank you.
So back then in 2009, I started testifying about poverty being mistaken for neglect, because at that point I'd had about 3 years of cases, and most cases are related to poverty and neglectful supervision, that sort of thing. So, so many times over the years I had thought, wow, if people could just refer to services, like we wouldn't be here, like they wouldn't have gotten their kids taken. And lawyers I work with thought the same thing. So I feel like this bill takes that referral process from, not reporting but referring, and it moves it upstream. So you hear about preventing abuse and neglect. This is actually preventing the reporting of unnecessary abuse and neglect. So when you look at, or you've probably heard over the years, like, there's 200,000 calls or whatever it is, and then they narrow down that most of those calls were not abuse and neglect, and they sift those out. I feel like this bill is going to help with a lot of those calls where professional reporters would be able to just refer out for services. And over the years, it's things like housing, daycare vouchers, neglectful supervision has a lot to do with, moms working, a lot of single moms working a couple jobs. They leave the kid with, the younger kid with the 12-year-olds, they try to cook macaroni and cheese and, the house is burning or whatever. Just things like that. It's like, is it abuse and neglect if we could refer to services, give them some daycare vouchers? So I feel like this really broadens that ability to work with families and give them the services. I especially like specifying some of the things that are common, like the behavioral issues, poverty-related issues, and truancy. And so things like that can be helped by taking it upstream. But I feel like with my motto is help a parent and you've already helped a child, and a bill like this, you're helping those parents, and so then at the end of the day, you're actually helping those children, and they're just going to be getting the services that they need. And then as we move and transition to community-based care, I feel like a bill like this is going to be even more important as those services move into the community. And so we really support this bill.
Questions, members?
Thank you.
Thank you. Chair calls Andrea Sparks. Good afternoon. I show you registered as Andrea Sparks with Buckner International, and you are testifying for the bill. Is that correct?
That's right. Thank you, Madam
Please
Chair.
begin.
Thank you, members. Buckner International provides families community-based services, prevention services, and family preservation services, much like the services that this bill contemplates referring families to. And we're very excited about this bill and the kind of new direction that our child welfare system is going and moving upstream. As y'all know, currently, it's a very reactive system that relies on members of the public and professionals reporting issues to DFPS. If you see something, say something. But we are at a time where more children and families are struggling with mental health, substance abuse, homelessness, exposure to violence, all the things y'all hear about in this committee. And I feel like we're at a time in our state where it's not okay just to say something. We actually need to do something and go back to community supports. Mandatory reporting can actually harm that system because it can function like a check in the box, like check the box, like, okay, I've done my duty. That's all I need to do. So when you see a struggling family, let's say you see a family living in their car in the Walmart parking lot. We've all seen that, right? Because they're waiting for that apartment to come available. Or you see the child at school who comes with the same outfit on every day for a week because maybe the washer and dryer broke and mom can't get to the laundromat. These are things that instead of just reporting to DFPS and hoping that something happens, we could move to a culture of supporting and actually referring to services. And I believe this bill gets us closer to that culture and that norm. We also don't want to see unnecessary investigations that not only traumatizes families, but actually takes time and energy away from the investigations that need to happen for harm purposes, for real abuse and neglect. We are excited about the bill encouraging members of the public and professionals to refer to services. We'd also like to see an awareness campaign around that. I was just looking at DFPS has done a really good job this April, Child Abuse Prevention Month. Their campaign used to be all about report, report, report. And I'm seeing support, support, support on their website, which is really good news. I feel like we need to get those messages out there and agree that a helpline, using an existing helpline, maybe enhancing that with family support navigators to help the professionals understand what services might be needed for a particular family who's struggling. That would really go a long way to taking this bill even further in impact. But this bill is definitely a big step in the right direction. We support it, and I'll answer any questions you'll have.
Question, members? Thank you. Chair calls Andrew Brown. I show you registered as Andrew Brown with the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and you're for the bill.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct? Please begin.
Thank you, members. Andrew Brown with the Texas Public Policy Foundation, testifying in support of House Bill 1667. I want to thank Representative Jatan for bringing this bill and for his work to help connect struggling families with the family preservation and supportive services that they need so that they can avoid the trauma of a CPS investigation. As Representative Jatan said in his layout, there are three main changes that this bill makes to current law that advances this all-important goal. First, it removes language in code that permits the filing of anonymous reports with CPS and instead requires DFPS to make reasonable efforts to obtain a reporter's name and contact information while protecting that reporter's identity through confidentiality. This change will help curtail intentionally false or malicious reports while making it easier for CPS to follow up with reporters to obtain sufficient information to corroborate reports that are made anonymously. And in cases where CPS is unable to obtain this contact information, it directs DFPS to existing code to provide a more limited investigation of those anonymous reports before going into a full investigation. Second, House Bill 1667 eliminates what's known as universal mandatory reporting and instead designates certain classes of professionals who have had regular contact with children as legally mandated reporters. Representative Ramos, you asked a great question about the deletion of any person and replacing that with professionals. That's what that's doing functionally, and why that's important is because failure to report in the state of Texas is a crime. As you know, it's a Class A misdemeanor. In most cases, it can be a state jail felony in other cases. One of the issues there is, as members of the general public, most of us have not been trained on how to properly identify and make a report of abuse or neglect. Professionals do receive this training often. And so putting that duty on professionals while adding language to the code that clarifies that all members of the public are encouraged to report, you're just not going to be criminalized if you don't make a report that you maybe should have, unless you have this extra duty. And this actually comports with research that shows that reports in states that have universal mandatory reporting are statistically less accurate than reports in states that only require certain classes of professionals to make reports. According to one peer-reviewed study published in the American Journal of Public Health, universal mandatory reporting, quote, can potentially lead to poorer outcomes because the high rate of the unsubstantiated reports in this state actually diverts valuable but limited resources from endangered children who are actually in need of protection. The final piece of the bill that we support is creating that alternative to reporting for certain circumstances that we know are poverty-related or behavior-related, things that don't put a child in danger of harm, and actually bringing in the community to support struggling families. It's a softer touch. It's the direction that child welfare practice is going, both here and nationally. And it's an alternative pathway that bolsters the work that the state is already doing to prioritize preservation over removal. Thank you all very much, and I'll answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Megan Corser. I show you as Megan Corser, and you are representing the Family Freedom Project, and you're for the bill. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, please begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. My name is Megan Corser. I'm the Chief Policy Analyst at the Family Freedom Project, and I'm testifying in support of HB 1667. HB 1667 would update the mandatory reporting statute for professionals to, instead of requiring professionals to report families to CPS for low-level issues, to allow professionals to report instead to a provider of community-based preservation services or family preservation services. And these types of low-level cases are generally considered neglectful supervision. That's the definition in the administrative code and what CPS calls these types of cases. In In 2022, just over half of CPS investigations, so about 181,000 of CPS's investigations were for neglectful supervision. And we know that most conditions associated with neglectful supervision are conditions that really essentially amount to poverty. These are things like housing insecurities, issues with lack of employment, food insecurity, things like missing school, clothing needs. These are all issues that are associated with poverty, but that are construed as neglectful supervision. And I think that there are three important things to note about these types of conditions. First of all, they are associated with poverty. They're not about a parent's lack of concern for their child. They're about a parent's lack of resources. And we don't think that these are things that really the CPS system is best equipped to handle. And I think the second thing that it's important to note about these types of conditions is that they are better addressed through services than through CPS investigation that can lead to potential removal of a child and separation from their family, placement in foster care, things like that. And one of the really great things that the bill does is it allows a professional to report that family directly to a service provider instead of to CPS. And I think third and most relevantly to this bill, the bill professionals are currently required under criminal penalty to report these families to CPS. And the bill would update that to, instead of requiring the professional to report to CPS, to report that family to a service provider who is better equipped to address those conditions so that the families can be lifted out of poverty and those conditions can be addressed effectively and kids don't need to go into the system. And so we think that this is a really great bill that encourages family preservation and moves us towards that ultimate goal in our child welfare system of keeping families together. We're in full support of the bill, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, members? Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair calls Bradley Pierce. Bradley Pierce. We'll show them registering but not testifying. Crystal Grimes. Julia Hatcher. I show you registered as Julia Hatcher. You're representing yourself and the Texas Association of Family Defense Attorneys, and you're for the bill. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, please begin.
Committee members, my name is Julia Hatcher. I'm an attorney in Galveston. I'm also the president of the Texas Association of Family Defense Attorneys. I just got into town, so please forgive my attire. But we strongly support this bill. We think that any objective to keep parents from coming into the legal system is probably a good thing if they can get the help that they need without being dragged into court. We've heard so many times from teachers, principals, other professionals that they call CPS because they're afraid that their license is going to be in jeopardy or they're going to be charged with a crime if they don't. So they call to be safe. And so many times it's not necessary. So that's why we think that this is really important. And especially the referral to community services is very needed. And just to give you an idea of a couple of stories, I had a case once where a teacher called on mom because she took the kids to school and she was wearing her pajamas. Okay. In that case, the caseworker actually testified in court that mom was neglectful because she let her kids ride the bus home, and it took an hour to ride the bus home, and so she was using the bus as a babysitter. I kid you not. I was just floored. I don't know about any of you, but I've let my son ride the bus home from school, and I have no control over the school district's bus schedule. So anyway, it's so important. We really commend the legislature for improving the child welfare system. And this is a great bill towards that goal. We do need awareness because when I read the bill, I was like, well, how's the public going to know about this? How are we going to get this out to the professionals that they don't have to call, that they can do these other things? And so I think as long as we address that somehow, then we're good.
Questions, members? Representative Noble.
Do you do family law? Is that what you do, or is this a different part of family law?
It's child welfare law.
Child welfare law, okay.
Yeah.
Then it may not, this may not be your area, but would this keep people from weaponizing CPS against each other in a divorce case, in custody?
I'm glad you
case?
brought that up because we do have a lot of cases that come in
Yeah.
where there's a custody case going on, and the parents will use CPS, call in a report because they want to get the child and they want custody of the child. And I actually just had an error of review a couple of months ago, specifically on that, and I was able to get the error overturned for that and other reasons. But I'm glad you brought that up because that is used as a weapon.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions, members? Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it. At this time, there's no other witness signed up to testify. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 1667? Seeing none, public testimony is closed, and the chair recognizes Representative Jeton to close.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to lay out this bill. Happy to answer any of the questions. Otherwise, I ask for your favorable consideration and close.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
If there's no objection, the bill will be left pending. The chair hears none, and HB 1667 is left pending without objection. The chair lays out HB 4132 and recognizes Representative Harris to explain her bill.
Hello, Mrs. Chairwoman and members. Thank you for the opportunity to lay out House Bill 4132 before you today. Members, this bill came to me from talking with a foster care parent who had plenty of resources and wanted to help out other foster care families or families looking to adopt. And so currently, DFPS does not allow you to give any payments back if you'd like to. And so this bill says that if you would like to give your foster care payments back to the state to be used for helping other families with foster care kiddos, helping those kids themselves, or with adoption services, they can do that. The state is able to do that. So, members, it's a pretty simple bill, but I'm happy to answer any questions, and I reserve my right to close.
Question, members? Representative Ramos.
Thank you. I'm always just wary of giving money back to the government.
Yeah,
Because you
yes,
just never
absolutely.
know. So were there conversations, or why wouldn't an individual get that check and donate it to an agency? There's so many agencies who are constantly asking for donations. So
It was voluntary. She was a foster care mom of one kiddo, had plenty of resources, and she just ended up in her circles of talking with other foster care families that she realized she wished she could give them more help or even give families looking to adopt more help. And so she had asked the state, hey, can I give my payments back? I don't need this. I can take care of this kiddo on my own. And they said, oh, no, legally we're not allowed to do that. And so she was just hoping that there's some way that if you voluntarily wanted to donate, there's nothing in this is pressured or you must or anything like that. It's completely voluntary. And so it's I think pretty straightforward, but happy to clarify anything further.
it just seems, instead of giving it back to DP, you don't know if it's actually going to get to the families versus
Oh, no, it
an
does.
agency
No,
that goes
yes,
directly.
Yes, ma'am, it does. So it says right here, to provide adoption assistance under Chapter 162, to provide any other assistance for foster child authorized by Title V. So that can even, that even includes kiddos who, if the state's taking care of them after 18, when they don't even have a family taking care of them. And so let's say this kiddo is going to community college, the state will give them some sort of stipend to kind of help them with other stuff. So we wanted to leave it open, and we're going to work with the agency after this to make sure that whoever is donating the payment knows where it's going and has more of a say in, hey, I'd like this to go towards adoption help or towards these kiddos or the families. One of the.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, members? Representative Noble?
So I actually served on my county CPS board before, but long ago.
Yeah.
And we actually had a dual board where we had the part we did that was for the county, but we also had a voluntary board where we did all sorts of things for our foster kids outside of of our county's resources. And I think a lot of counties have that. There would be nothing currently that would prevent her from, or him, from giving those payments to those kind of boards that are out there already doing this work. So I'm not positive it needs legislative remedy, because there are a lot of those kind of foster adopt boards out there.
So if she wanted to give her foster care payment from the state to
whatever county, or a lot of counties have those boards that are dual boards. That, for instance, mine that I served on, we paid for out of the foundation, if you would call it that. We paid for the kids' senior pictures and their senior ring and their driver's license and a computer to go to college. We did things like that. So,
So I just want to make sure I'm clear, so that we can change the things if we need to. Are you saying that if she got the payment from the state, she would then just be able to take whatever other money that she wanted to and give it to the county?
Yeah, or the
Okay.
the foundation that oversees that. But that would be completely a voluntary and actually probably a deduction on her because it would be given to a charity at that point.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you for that.
Uh-huh.
Other questions, members? All righty. I am not showing anyone wanting to testify on your bill. And I will ask if there's anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 4132. Seeing none, public testimony is closed, and the chair recognizes Representative Harris to close.
Thank you, Mrs. Chairwoman, members. I'd appreciate the committee's favorable consideration, and I close.
Ready, thank you. If there's no objection, House Bill 4132 will be left pending. Is there objection? The chair hears none. HB 4132 is left pending without objection. The chair lays out House Bill 4351 and recognizes Representative Noble to explain her bill.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. For giving me an opportunity to lay out House Bill 4351, and I am laying out a committee substitute on this one.
Okay.
In this bill, DFPS is seeking to...
Just a minute, we need to lay out your...
Sorry.
Do we have this?
Yes, so you just this part.
Okay, the chair offers a complete committee substitute for HB 4351. Members, are there any questions for Representative Noble? And we'll begin by allowing her to lay out her bill.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman. DFPS is seeking to align the training for the Adult Protective Services caseworkers with the hybrid training techniques that are already used for the CPS investigations. This bill would update the requirements for our Adult Protective Services training to allow trainees to initiate cases and conduct face-to-face interviews in the field while under supervision. According to DFPS, a high percentage of caseworkers leave the agency shortly after completing their training. This is due to many finding themselves, once they are assigned to cases, inadequately prepared for the demand of actual casework. Providing this valuable hands-on training will offer the opportunity for trainees to gain real-world experience and needed fundamental skills under supervision to be successful Adult Protective Services caseworkers, and this in turn will help reduce our high turnover rate. And we do have a resource witness from DFPS. I am happy to answer any questions and reserve the right to close.
Members, questions for Representative Noble? All righty. Chair calls Crystal Grimes. Crystal Grimes. Okay, we'll show her registering but not testifying. That's all the public testimony. Do we need to hear from the resource witness from DFPS? Alrighty, thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on, for, or against House Bill 4351? Seeing none, public testimony is closed, and the chair recognizes Representative Noble to close.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I respectfully request passage.
The committee substitute is withdrawn, and if there's no objection, the bill will be left pending. The chair hears none, and HB 4351 is left pending without objection. The chair lays out HB 3265 and recognizes Representative Manuel to explain his bill. Is this your first bill?
No, but it's my first one in here. Thank you, Chairwoman and members, for the opportunity to present this bill today. HB 3265 seeks to amend the government code, which would allow the Health and Human Services Commission to provide a semi-annual report to the designated recipients. Currently, for the 2022 to 2023 biennium, the Chief Medicaid and CHIP Service Office is tasked with drafting 87 reports. The number of reports has made it difficult for staff to perform current business functions and oversight, along with ensuring high-quality reports are submitted in a timely manner. This bill proposes to streamline and consolidate reports to make more efficient and effective use of staff time and resources. The Chief Medicaid and CHIP Services, the purposes of the MCS purposes following changes to reporting requirements, reducing reporting frequency of the medical dependent child program, monitoring report for 4 times per year to 2 times per year, combining 3 reports and change frequency to biennium, annual report or qualified base outcome and process measures, annual report on statewide initiatives to improve quality of maternal care, long-term care, early warning systems. These changes would allot enough time to pass between each report so that the information provided is meaningful and actionable. This will include information that is quality-based outcomes and processes for Medicaid with maternal health and long-term care. Although there was a 60% increase in the number of legislative reports between 2020 and 2021 and 2022 and 2023 biennium, there was not an account for an increase in staff resources. There isn't a fiscal note, and as of right now, there should not be any committee substitute, and I know we do have a resource in case there are any questions, and with that, I reserve the right to close.
Questions, members? Ready? Anybody want to hear from the resource witness? Okay. At this time, I'm not showing anyone is signed up to testify. Is there anyone else or anyone who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 3265? Seeing none, public testimony is closed, and the chair recognizes Representative Manuel to close.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you, members. With that, I will close and say this is the smartest Health and Human Services Committee I've ever seen in my years. And I look forward to you all voting this out favorably. Thank you so much.
If there's no objection, HB 3265 will be left pending. Is there objection? The chair hears none. HB 3265 is left pending without objection. Members, that concludes today's agenda. Is there any further business for the committee to address? If not, the chair moves to adjourn. Is there objection? Hearing none, the committee stands adjourned, subject to the call of the chair.